for us today. This is going to be kind of the first of its kind for us. We've never had anyone like Angler's Edge mapping that we have today. We have Craig McDougall from them. I guess just take a quick second here, Craig, to introduce yourself and the company and kind of let people know what you guys are up to.
Okay, thanks, Logan and Brandon, for having me on here. Yeah, I'm one of the guys behind a Winnipeg-based company called Angler's Edge Mapping, and we basically got frustrated with the quality of maps available to anglers. We're big anglers ourselves. Um, we got frustrated with the quality of maps available and kind of started taking matters into our own hands. Um, the company got started in about 2012, and before too long, we were producing digital maps compatible with Lowrance sonars, as well as printed maps to hang on the cottage wall. And more recently, we have also partnered up with an app company called Avenza Maps so that we can get our maps out onto mobile devices, phones, and iPads, and that sort of thing.
Sweet. I'm excited that you said the events map because I had that app on my phone too, and I was looking over the website and stuff today, and I don't know if it's on there, if I missed it or whatnot. But I was like, I wonder if these are the same guys because I've used it at Clearwater, and so was that you guys that mapped that as well?
Yes, we
Okay.
mapped Clearwater 3 or 4 years ago, I think.
Okay. Yeah. So I used that. We went. Oh, when was that? 2 years ago, I think I was there. And so it was during the summer, and we used that. And it's so nice that it can follow you on your phone like that if you don't have a Lowrance, right? And basically, we were able to go all over the place, check out what we wanted to do before we even step foot on the water, and it was quite nice. So I was happy to hear you say that. So I guess when you say frustrated with the like the mapping that was out there, I guess for us up here, that could be the lack of mapping as well that's out here, right?
Yeah, I think we had it pretty bad in Manitoba too. Like there was a lot of lakes that literally had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there was some lakes that had something, but it was, not very good based on old data, old government data that just, didn't really cut it, especially on the Canadian Shield where there's a lot of hazards,
Yeah.
rocks and reefs and whatnot. Like I grew up on the Winnipeg River. I grew up in a town called Pinawa, and I basically had a home range of about 5 kilometers upstream of Pinawa, and the river went for another 35 before it hit a dam. But I was so scared to go further because, you might not make it back in one piece kind of thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
wrecked multiple lower ends. My dad wrecked the lower end on that section of river. And so it kind of scares you into, a little tiny little area. And yeah, so when we started mapping this, it opened up a world of opportunity. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm
No
sure you get to
kidding.
see a lot of pretty cool places too, hey?
Yeah, oh for sure. We've been on the water all over the place, especially in the last few years. We've been branching out into northern Manitoba and into Saskatchewan, northwest Ontario as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Because
So,
yeah, sorry,
oh, go
I was
ahead.
just gonna jump in there and say yeah, because like it seems like Ontario always has great mapping, right? So the fact that there is a focus on the central part of Canada is nice, but you mentioned like Lawrence. How did that come about? Like when you guys first started, was there an agreement with them right off the bat, or what is that process to get a company like that on board to utilize your mapping?
Well, Lawrence kind of made a decision way back in 2014 that they were going to work with small developers.
Okay.
So they kind of made it known that, we're willing to work with you. And we reached out to them and got something formally developed. And
Okay.
they were doing the same thing with companies all over Europe and South Africa, Australia.
Gotcha.
So they made a really good good decision there, I think, and it got a
Hmm.
lot of people interested in sort of developing products, high quality products.
Yeah, it's almost like crowdsourcing that information, right? Rather than them having to worry about going and mapping that all themselves, you're able to kind of get people from all over, kind of dot everyone all over the place and get those things going, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of like crowdsourcing. It kind of is I would call it a grade above crowdsourcing because the onus is on those developers to, take really good care of the data and their name is, you know, at stake, I guess, if you will. Um, there's obviously other crowdsourcing options have developed and taken off over the years, but they always, the data's, I shouldn't say always, but sometimes the data is a little bit questionable. Water
Hmm.
levels change and, it doesn't really get reflected in those outputs.
Right. And I guess this is kind of going down the line of topics here, but I guess you probably saw those water level changes a lot with Diefenbaker, right?
Yeah, Deef's a challenge from a processing standpoint when it fluctuates so much. That's we honestly I'd hope to have the Diefenbaker um, East map released by now, but we're just still processing data. There's so
Right.
much data. It's a really intricate lake, actually. I had no idea. We've done other lakes in Saskatchewan, and they're not they're not like Deef. Like,
Hmm.
first of all, they're nowhere near as deep, but they're also not generally as intricate with
Yeah.
little coulees and valleys and old river channels, and
Yeah.
it's really cool.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I always anytime I go to Deef, like just so you have an idea, I don't know if you've driven around the Chain Lakes or through Buffalo Pound, stuff like that, with it being in the valley there. I always just look at Buffalo Pound when I'm out at the cabin there, and I'm like, this is basically if Diefenbaker was empty, it'd be something similar to this. Or if you took Buffalo Pound and filled it up to the top, is what I kind of like to imagine Diefenbaker as, because it's just you can tell with the, like you said, lots of those coulees and lots of those arms that are going off. Like I'm like, if you just totally train this, like is pretty well what it would look like, right? Like that's what makes up for that being so intricate, and it makes for some great fishing opportunities because, like you said, we don't have a lot of that here with those arms and whatever coolies, stuff like that. So I totally agree with you there. But I guess kind of going back to the business, how did like was it always a plan to kind of turn it into a business? Like was that kind of like we're going to start doing this or?
Well, not really. I think people sometimes will laugh at our whole business trajectory. Um, no, we were just initially we were just hoarding data, right? Like we collected data and we started using it and started catching a lot of fish, and it was getting pretty darn expensive um, with the gas. And admittedly, gas was a lot cheaper than it is now
Hmm.
back in 2012-ish.
Oh yeah.
Um, but the lower ends and props and stuff add up too. And so we initially just were trying to recover some of our costs. The first thing we started selling was printed maps. And that was just to try to recover some of our costs. And we were only selling them to our friends. We weren't really promoting it at all. And then we just kind of realized, well, this is getting kind of crazy. Like we're going in debt pretty bad.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
I'm bankrolling it, and my brother and my dad are kind of bankrolling it, and we just decided, well, if we're gonna get serious about this, we really have to, start trying to sell some maps versus just hoarding the data for ourselves. Um, so we did in about 2014. It coincided with that Lowrance licensing agreement, and we started taking it a little more seriously.
Nice.
There you go. So is it just still a full family business, or have you guys branched out to a size where you actually employ quite a few people too, or is it just still strictly kind of 5 people or less?
It's expanded. My brother
Yeah.
Rob, he's the vice president, and he's still involved. My dad has passed on, unfortunately. But there's about, I don't know, 15 or so guys
Okay.
that contribute fairly intensively, and then another, I don't know, 10 or so that are, loosely involved.
Yeah.
We've
Okay.
got
Okay.
a few pretty high-end pro staff in Manitoba. Matt Cornell from Bruin Outfitting and Guiding, Mike Boris and Derek Stannard, who are pretty big tournament guys out here. Um, yeah, quite a few people
Cool.
involved.
Cool. No,
No,
yeah, because it sounded
that
like
makes
it
sense.
started out kind of like a family of affair, and then I wasn't too sure if it was still kind of that tight knit, or I mean, obviously, if you're expanding to so many different provinces, right, it becomes pretty wearing too if you're going to be driving around mapping all these lakes. Like you got to get more and more people involved. So
Yeah, exactly. It's still, I would call it a very tight-knit group. Like we're pretty
okay,
good friends with everybody that's involved.
yeah,
You gotta kind of be a certain type of individual to want to do this, like to want to
yeah,
spend your free time driving around a lake and not fishing.
yeah,
Um, it's just, yeah, you gotta be different. That's all.
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh,
There's pros and
that's fair.
there's pros and cons. Pros and cons.
Yeah,
I just want to drag a crank everywhere, at least have something
Yeah,
in the water.
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. No, I guess so. Kind of transitioning to the lakes themselves. What kind of criteria are you looking for when you guys decide, okay, we're gonna do this water body? Is it like a by demand thing from the comments and stuff you get, or do you guys have some kind of system that helps you choose?
Personal preference. Whatever lake they want
There
to
is a
fish.
lot. No, there is a lot of personal preference. We don't try to influence what our surveyors want to do, or what we want. We don't try to influence what we want them to do too much. We just kind of, they know their areas best, and sort of, their personal preference drives a lot of our selection, basically.
Okay.
Um, my theory is that, you know, you have to be interested in mapping these lakes in order to map them well. If you're not
Yeah,
interested, the data suffers big time. And we don't really have an interest in putting out something that isn't very, very good.
Right.
So that's part of it. It's, I don't know, from a business standpoint, maybe not the best business plan, but that's the way we do it.
Yeah.
no, but
Well,
that
and
makes sense though.
yeah. No, it's true. If it's especially when you're kind of running off passion for it too, you gotta continue to fuel that, right? And I kind of wondered about how that works because I know I've checked out your guys' list before, specifically in Saskatchewan. And there was, I can't remember the name of it. There was one of the trout lakes up north, I believe, and I'm like, oh, that one's kind of random, but I'm like, it's also very handy because I was looking at the lakes up around there, and so because then right, because with being Saskatchewan, you just think like Last Mountain, Deef, Tobin, right? Those would be like some of the more popular ones, and then there's just this stock trout lake, and I was like, there must be something else that goes into this other than just demand. So that's nice to know that it comes off of you guys, who, like you said, you guys are fishermen in yourself. So I think that kind of helps with things as well because it's obviously fishermen using the maps, and you guys kind of know what you're looking for too, rather than just some company that's just out there to survey, right? So I think that helps as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes
So
sense.
with how many lakes have you guys actually done? Do you know?
Um, Honestly, offhand, I don't know what the number is. It's got to be over 100 now.
Okay.
Um, like we're gonna add, and the size varies obviously quite dramatically from,
Yeah.
trout pond size lakes all the way up to Clearwater and
Mm-hmm.
the South Basin of Lake Winnipeg. Um, but yeah, it's got to be over 100. I think this year alone we'll add around 20 new lakes.
Okay.
I think
Awesome.
6 or 7 were in Saskatchewan, and
Nice.
the rest were a little bit further east in Manitoba and Ontario.
Okay.
Is like Lake Winnipeg, or what lake is like your most popular? Do you guys track like usage?
Well, with the Avenza app, we can really track, downloads because everything it's all by lake.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell with our Lorance stuff because we put so many maps on a chip.
Okay.
But with the Avenza stuff, it's trackable, and Lake Winnipeg is very high demand. Clearwater Lake, um, we were surprised, like crazy surprised at how many people wanted that Clearwater map.
Yeah.
I guess Logan, you mentioned you were out there too, but
I can see why they want it. That lake is is insane, and I was gonna ask you like how hard is that to map? Because we were there 5 days and we got to fish one evening and one afternoon because of the winds.
oh, Clearwater, both Lake Winnipeg and Clearwater are just terrible to
Yeah,
map. Um, yeah, like Clearwater, I dare say Clearwater was worse per unit area than Lake Winnipeg. Um, like it's more intricate, so you have to be tighter with all your passes and whatnot. And for some reason, it blows up and it's nasty so
hmm
often. So our primary surveyor on Clearwater, he was going out in the middle of the night because it was calm.
right.
He would
Wow.
he would go out for like 6 hours in the dead black of night, and
It's
you know
dedication.
he'd be careful about it and had
Yeah.
lights and all that, and nobody else is crazy enough to be out there at that time. But yeah,
Yeah, no,
it was
that's
crazy.
The amount of
I can,
dedication that goes into this, eh?
yeah.
Oh yeah,
But to me, it makes sense that that would be popular because it's. I think that one, like obviously with Lake Winnipeg, you'd get a lot of, I'd say, locals more around there that would buy that. But I feel like Clearwater, you get a lot more people that are coming for a weekend trip that maybe do it once or twice a year. But you get a lot more destination anglers, if you want to call it that. And with a lake that's so big and basically round like that, like you got to have a map to kind of know where you want to set up, especially for Lakers and stuff. So I could kind of see why that makes sense. And then also, I don't know about the northern makeup of Lake Winnipeg, but from my understanding, most of it's just like, is it like 20 feet and shallower for that lake?
well, the South Basin's generally shallow. It
Okay.
I would say it tops out at maybe like 30 until you get into the Hecla area, and then it gets quite deep and quite intricate as
Okay.
well. But there actually is a lot of nearshore structure on Lake Winnipeg, and actually we're gonna release a whole bunch more data in about a month or so for the South Basin, and it's kind of crazy how much certain parts have changed um, due to ice scouring in the past 5 years since we started surveying it in 2018. There's there's some really neat stuff. I don't know how fishy it is. We suspect that these gouges that showed up were things that happened last year, based on talking with Matt Cornell from Bruin Outfitting and Guiding. He was kind of out there um, seeing it in real time and then showing in the preliminary map afterwards. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I think we're gonna blow a lot of minds when we show this data.
With how much things have
Interesting.
changed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Oh, that's pretty sweet. So with that stuff, like I know I saw on your website the Wekusko Lake, can people request places to be done? Because I know like obviously there's a lodge there at Wekusko. Like, is that something that like a lodge could request, or is that just once again your guys' preference to go to and do that lake?
Yeah, we definitely listen to people who request lakes. Like we have a sort of a request hotline, if you will, on our website. Um, we take it into account. We pass it on to our surveying teams, and they kind of ultimately make the decision about if it's something they want to tackle or not.
Okay.
Um, we're doing Rocky Lake. Well, I should say
Okay.
we already did Rocky Lake. We're going to release it this spring. So that's a pretty popular lodge lake up in northern Manitoba. We're working on Athapap. Um, yeah, we'll probably tackle a variety of different lodge lakes in the very near
Right.
future.
Okay. That Rocky Lake, I we fished it a couple days when it was too windy to go on Clearwater, and it was some of the rocks there. They're just nuts. Like I hadn't really seen, like obviously you fish shield lakes and stuff in Saskatchewan, but for the way that some of these rocks were and the like the rock shelves and stuff that you could see while you're fishing for smallies was just nuts. And I was like, we're out there blind pretty well, so we're just kind of the first time we're heading to the spot. It's going slow, basically getting ourselves a safe path because, like you said, you don't want to take out lower units and stuff like that. But I couldn't believe that lake was pretty sweet. And would you say that lake's kind of like a medium size, like kind of a happy medium size, for especially for mapping?
Yeah, it's I don't know. Yeah, about a middle of the road size lake
Yeah,
for northern Manitoba anyway.
yeah,
It's got a
that makes
lot of
sense.
bass in it.
Yes,
It's a crazy fishery.
yeah, some big fat bass too.
Yeah.
Like lots of verging on that master. Like I think master is 18, if I believe, in Manitoba for the smallies, and we caught so many in that like 17 range, and all had big bellies on them. And just we never actually did get a master there. We got some out of some other lakes, but like just the thickness of those fish was awesome. And we only have pretty well one public lake in Saskatchewan that has them, so we don't get to do that as often here, right? So that
Oh,
was
okay.
definitely a treat. And the lake that we have is pretty well Manitoba anyway, so it doesn't even matter really. But the majority of the population is not close to it, so it's nice to get on those. But when you mentioned for Clearwater, you talked about a unit, like an area. Is that what you guys refer them to, or does that make sense?
Oh, per unit area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what size is that?
I don't. It's just sort of a generic term.
Oh, okay.
Like a square kilometer of area on Clearwater might take 10 times longer than a square kilometer of area on Lake Winnipeg or
Oh, okay.
say
Yeah.
Blackstrap Reservoir in Saskatchewan.
Right. Okay. So
Gotcha.
you couldn't really even try to put like an average time it takes because every lake, depending on how intricate it is, it just takes what it takes basically. Like, you can't be like, oh, this should take us this long because as soon as you get out there and see how detailed it is, that basically adds time to it, kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, like I
Okay.
can sort of predict, based on the general area of where the lake's located. Like if it's in the Canadian Shield, it's going to take a long time. If it's in Saskatchewan and it doesn't have an old river channel, it doesn't take terribly long typically.
Hmm.
If it has an old river channel, like say Rafferty Reservoir, that takes a lot of time. Like to sort of capture those details accurately, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of time.
No
So
doubt.
when you say a lot of time, like what is a time frame when you're going to your next targeted lake? You know, how long does that normally take to actually collect the data and be confident to put that out? Like, is this a
Like
yearly
a year.
thing? Like, like how long does this actually take?
Yeah, like small lakes, we measure our timelines in days. The big lakes, we're getting into weeks, if not months, of
Okay.
solid time on the water. And you can't be on the water all the time, especially on the big lakes because of
Yeah.
wind. So that's sometimes why, it takes us 2 years to do a lake like Clearwater because
Okay.
we're not going to force it. We're not going to do anything unsafe, first and
No.
foremost, but we're also not going to force bad data. Like when it's really windy and nasty out and your boat's bouncing around, so is your sonar.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, so there's no point in trying to, force it. We just take our time and eventually we'll have a really, really good map.
You'll probably like this. I don't even, most people probably wouldn't even admit this, but when I very first time like ever using sonar, when I got it from my boat, I don't know how young I was, but the very first one I got, it was some little square hummingbird, and I was out there on a wavier day, and I'm like, there's like this is some quite like the structure down there. Like this bottom is just up and down, up and down. And I'm like, what is going on here? So I'm like, well, this might be a not bad spot to fish. And keep in mind, I'm young, and then now obviously figured out pretty quick. This is because of the waves, but it took me a little bit to figure that out. And I always think back and laugh at that, especially when I see it out there now when I'm on a big rough lake or whatever. And I'm like, I used to think that was just what the bottom was. Turns out it's just flat there. But yeah.
Yeah, we get comments sometimes, especially on lakes that are generally flat, about how, you know, my user mapping shows a lot more structure out here, and I'm like, yeah, it might, but I don't know if it's real.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
yeah. No,
that's the
that's
thing
fair.
is real versus like you see some stuff too, and it's just sometimes it is difficult to tell, and when you're in like really messy rocky areas or on big drops and stuff like that, especially in the shield lakes, you just get some weird readings sometimes, and I'm like kind of what is this? Turns out it's some kind of shelf or whatever, but sometimes you get that lighter reading, and sure enough, you get snagged on it or something like that. You kind of figure out what's going on, but like you said, depending on how well and just how much goes into setting up a sonar, right? Some people their stuff isn't set up correctly, so of course it's gonna be reading differently as well. So there's obviously
Yeah,
lots that goes into that. So you might be probably one of the best people to ask how someone should set up their transducer on the back of their boat.
yeah. Well, it's a bit of an art, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
and it's hard to generalize between boat types. Like, fiberglass hulls are very forgiving. You can mount your transducers in a lot of places and get a nice clean reading. Um, Aluminum boats are tough in general, like rivets and strakes and
Hmm.
everything. Every little disturbance in the water affects your transducer reading. If it's in line with your transducer, it'll create turbulent water and basically mess things up. Um,
Hmm.
Incidentally, people always say, like, mount it on the left hand side. If you're at the back of your boat and you're facing your motor, mount it on the left hand side of the motor. Or sorry, no, they usually say on the right hand side of the motor. I typically mount mine on the left because that's where I like to jig. I
Right.
don't think it really makes that much of a difference, at least on, boats that are 90 horsepower or less.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and one other like crazy thing that we sort of realized with the big long 3-in-1 style, like uh, similar to the Mega transducers, um, on our Lunds, like 18-foot Lunds, we started accidentally. We mounted right behind a strake, and it turned out that produced the best reading on the whole boat. Like, we'd been
No.
messing around with it forever and just kind of struggling with the readings. And then we put it behind the strake, and yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, it's kind of messing around with it. I know when we're setting up our boats, when I head up guiding, and you got to put the boats in for the start of the year, right, and get everything set up again. I did the same as you. I always put it on my left side because I would jig off the left corner of the boat there with the tiller, so it kind of get a better reading there. But lots of the other guides, I think they're saying it had something to do with the way that the prop turns, and better off to be on the right side as far as prop wash and stuff because they're mapping going full tilt, so around 30 mile an hour. Lots of the time, obviously not totally accurate, but it gives them a general idea when they're ripping around. And so they've got those down there, and then they put little metal blockers over top to stop the rooster tail from coming up too high and all that stuff. So I think I still keep mine on my left side if I remember correctly because I like having that reading right there when I am jigging.
Hmm.
But yeah, I agree with you. I've heard that as well. I think my boat back home here is on the right side, but I didn't really even look into that. That's just where the mounting plate was for the boat, so that's where I put them basically. So I hadn't done too much research on that part of it, but
Right.
yeah.
So when you go to do a lake, like, do you just go do it, or do you have to get any type of like government approval or anything like that? Like, is the process pretty seamless? If you decide to go do a lake, you just pass it along to your surveyor, and they kind of just go about it as they wish type thing, or is there actually like a large approval process to actually get this data?
There's a few lakes that we've done that are electric motors only. So we've used kayaks and small boats with electric motors pushing them. Um, other than that, no, we haven't really had to
Okay.
pursue any permissions officially, I don't think.
Okay.
Okay.
Which makes
Yeah.
sense, right? Everyone else has it on their boats
Yeah.
to use it personally, the mapping functions, right? Lots of the time. So I don't know why it would be any different, but who knows with the way government is. I'm sure they could find a way to make you have to do something about that. But no, that makes sense there. And I guess when we talked about the amount of time it takes you to do a body of water, how much on a percentage wise, if you can come up with it, how much dead water do you think you're going over when you're surveying?
In the context of, is there fish in it, you mean?
Yeah, like what, like how much do you of the lake? Like you know how they say like
90,
90% of the
10, yeah.
fish are yeah. Like did you find that to be true or
Oh yeah, I think
yeah?
that that's a very accurate generalization. Sometimes I think it's even maybe an underestimate, like the 90% of the fish are in 10% of the water.
Hmm.
Um, I often think about bass, and I feel like maybe not in the summer when they're on the shorelines and scattered everywhere, but like during the fall and during the winter, it's probably like 99% and 1%,
Oh wow,
right? Like they're just so congregated in tiny little areas.
right. I guess we should have asked you. Are you a bass guy or a walleye guy? That should have been maybe at the top of the episode, so we know what we what we were getting into.
Yeah, you might not have had me on here. I don't know.
No, we like them all. Burbot's our favorite, so we can't even
Bourbon.
really talk.
Burb's the
Oh,
word.
geez. Um, my brother Rob is the bass guy
Okay,
from our team. I consider myself a multi-species guy. I like
that's the
probably
best way to be.
crappie and lake trout in the winter, and I like walleye in the summer.
Okay,
I bass fish too. Like I do like all species really.
right. Okay,
Yeah,
yeah, because that would like when you're driving around, if you were just a walleye guy, you're going to be looking at totally different. Like when you come across something, you're going to be thinking about that probably totally different than a bass guy would, right? Or depending on whatever your species is, right? Because when you're going around, I'm sure you find some pretty sweet spots that you're like, yeah, I'll have to come back here and check it out, right? Like you basically turn that lake inside out, as you can tell from the picture behind you. So
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. I actually stopped. I used to bring a fishing rod in the boat, and I stopped because, it's so hard to, keep going once you see, opportunities to fish.
hmm
Yeah.
And if you really want to get things done, it's I don't know. That's the decision that I made, and some days I regret it, but
ah,
yeah.
no,
No, that's fair.
I wouldn't get any mapping done. As soon as I found a spot that was holding fish, I just want to sit there the
Yeah.
rest of the day.
Totally.
Yeah.
See, and we miss out on those opportunities for like crappie, like and for bass. Like we're very limited here in Saskatchewan for those species. But like, yeah, I heard crappie's like unbelievable. And like I lived in North Dakota for a little bit, so I got the chance to do a little bit down there,
Okay.
but never made the trip out east of Saskatchewan here to do any of that. But it's a blast. Like if you can get on a bite, like we got perch, but I don't think it's the same.
Perch are fun. Big perch are fun.
That's true.
I definitely like them, but crappie, they just school up and they sit so high in the water column sometimes, and you can, yeah, in the fall you can get on them in huge numbers, and they're just willing biters. Yeah, you should really come out to the Whiteshell area in Manitoba because it is crazy for big crappie right now.
So out of every option, that's what's your number one? Is that it for crappie?
Like
If a
in
guy,
terms
if
of
a
where to
guy,
go.
yeah, in Manitoba, if a guy from Saskatchewan, if we were to make a trip out there, where would you recommend?
Yeah, for crappie, I would definitely go to the Whiteshell.
Okay,
The other really, really good one is actually the lake that's in my background there. Lac de Bonnie is taking off as a crappie fishery. They got in there, I don't know, maybe a couple decades ago.
okay,
Um, People were catching them in low numbers, but they have started to boom. So that's one to keep your eye on. If you were to
is
go
that
like
why
right now,
it? Yeah,
if you were to go right now, I would say the white shell's better. But
Okay.
in 2 to 3 years, I would expect that Lactabani is, world class for crappie.
Is that why
Yes.
it's framed on your wall behind you?
Yeah, partially. I think it's a really pretty lake in general, with the old
Okay.
river channel and yeah.
So how deep is that purpley blue section there behind you?
Uh, Purple on the Lactabani print map starts at about 50 feet, so it's not crazy deep. Um, right where you can sort of see there. If
Yeah.
you were to go a little bit further north, it drops down to maybe about 90 near the MacArthur Falls Dam.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet.
That's
Sweet.
pretty deep though.
Oh, for what we see in Saskatchewan, yeah.
Well, not compared to Diefenbaker, it's like
No, true.
200.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That Diefenbaker's an outlier.
It's
I guess
it's
Last Mountain
built
has some
different.
deeps too. Yeah. Nothing is Last Mountain's nowhere near as deep, obviously, as Deef is, but Deef is built different. That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother beast. I remember the first time I went out there, I was like 14, and we're out there in the fishing boat. We just launched at Elbow there, and we're out right in the middle of the whole thing. With no idea what we're doing, just driving around. I'm like, this is like 200 some feet or something like that. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what are we? We leave Buffalo Pound that morning where it's the deepest at 16 feet for the whole
Yeah.
entire lake, and then we're at Diefenbaker. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a whole nother animal.
It's
And
life-changing.
Still haven't cracked the code there totally at Deef. So that's what keeps us
Are
coming
you
back.
fishing for walleye at Deef, or are you guys going for trout and whitefish and stuff like that?
In the summer there, I typically have just gone for trout. I've tried a couple times for walleye. I actually have never caught a walleye there. Every time I go there, it seems to be mostly for trout. I think I've tried once or twice for a walleye when I was younger, but basically trout in the summer and fall, and then burbot and pike in the winter is kind of
Yep.
the targets for me. I know if you head down south there more into the river, that can be really good for walleye and stuff. But kind of for us, right around Elbow there is about an hour drive, something like that. So we typically just head out there and see what we can find. It's just such a different lake and so different than us typically hitting Buffalo Pound or Last Mountain or whatever. So it's just kind of fun to do something different there. If we want walleye, we're lucky we're close to Last Mountain, where obviously no secret, everyone knows how good Last Mountain can be too. So that's we're kind of spoiled sitting in the middle of these two lakes. So it's definitely hard to choose some days what you want to go and do.
Right on. So, okay,
Yeah.
that brings me to a question then.
Yep.
If you guys had a choice, how would you prioritize, sort of the next projects that we would do in Saskatchewan? Like, is Last Mountain the sort of, next place that we should look at, or Tobin, or
I honestly think with Last Mountain, so many people that do fish that lake hard have it pretty well all mapped already. It seems
Yeah.
not like maybe as in depth, but so many of those tournament guys, from what I saw with the little bit that I've been out with some of them, is they've pretty well. I think it's more Humminbird there, but whether it's the social maps and stuff that Humminbird has, everyone seems to have it figured out pretty good for the most part. I don't know about Tobin as much, so I would be that one would kind of interest me because you've got the river section that then flows out into the main lake there. So I think that could be interesting. And then you've also got the flats. If you want to talk about taking lower ends off, you go to the flats and hit some deadheads and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So I think Tobin could be a cool one because it's with the Vanity. That's a big draw for a lot of serious anglers, and they've got some resorts there and stuff like that. So I don't know really what there is available because when we went up there for the Vanity, we didn't take my boat or any of my stuff. So I don't know what's already available kind of thing. But I do know I've seen tons of guys sonars from Last Mountain that anywhere we're driving, they've seemed to have mapped. So I don't know if you'd get those guys as much, but I know Last Mountain has a name out there for good fishing, so there's probably lots of destination anglers there as well. So
I was just going to
it'd
say
be
the
tough to say.
demand would be pretty high, I think, for, either one of
Both.
those lakes. I think Tobin would definitely be a little bit more diverse and is maybe a little less figured out maybe by a lot of people. Me personally, right? Like I don't spend a whole lot of time in the north, so Tobin is honestly I have no idea what Tobin has to offer as far as as a lake. But yeah, Last Mountain Lake. If people are putting in the time, most of the time they have it pretty figured out. But that being said, I think there's a lot of people that have not figured it out or haven't had the time to do that, right? Like it's majority your tournament anglers that have it all mapped out, right? So it's your general public people that don't have a boat or the time to be out there every weekend mapping. I think it'd be something that a lot of people would want to have and not have to spend the time to go do it themselves. But a lot of people too, they want to go figure it out themselves as well. But I think Last Mountain Lake, you'd get a lot of demand.
Our requests, I would say, for Saskatchewan, Tobin and Last Mountain are number 1 and 2. Well, after people started learning that we're actually doing Diefenbaker.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I was just curious, but it sounds like it's kind of
it's
like
the same.
50-50.
Yeah, I'd be interested. I think there could be some really cool ones like Lac La Ronge and stuff like that farther north. Like there, we've got some pretty cool lakes. I know I've done just a little bit of mapping on some of the lakes that I go to up there, and it's just like you said, those shield lakes are so intricate, and it's so cool once you do fill out an area. Like once you can fill, like when you can zoom out a bit on your map, see a good area, but you can see that you filled that entire area. As I'm sure you've seen a ton. I've only done that a couple of times, and it looks so cool once it is done, especially in those northern lakes. So I would have like personal ones that I think would be cool up there. But as far as the actual demand, there's not many people going to these lakes. Like I've talked to lots of buddies who fish a lot, and they're like, I haven't even heard of that lake. Why are you going there? Kind of thing. I was like, I don't know. I just saw it on the side of the road and kind of want to put my boat in
Turned
and see
off
what's in there.
and,
Yeah. So no, it's tough to say. And I guess for Deef, I know you mentioned it's only a section of it, right? So what area have you guys mapped that you're going to be eventually releasing?
So we've mapped everything east of, I think it's called Hitchcock Bay. So like there's the Koto arm, and then
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember the name of the other arm that goes sort of south east of that, and then it sort of turns west, and there's a big elbow there at elbow. And then we go until it turns again, kind of. So it is a big area. It is a really big area.
Right.
There's more to it, and I imagine it gets shallower as you go to the west, and it kind of becomes less like a reservoir and more like a river. But
Okay.
we're pretty excited about this release. It's
So
intricate.
so you're saying from Hitchcock, everything northeast of there basically. So you go all the way up to the dam and then all the
Yep.
way to the Quappelle Dam as well?
Yep.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, that's pretty popular area of the lake there, so that makes sense. And so that basically, when I was talking about going out on to Deep for the first time, it was basically where that Y is, and that's where I was out in the middle there, like where am I, kind
Right.
of thing. So, yeah, no, that is a big chunk of that lake, and a very popular chunk. I know around Riverhurst and stuff is popular as well. But that's some massive water that you guys covered there. Then I didn't realize it was the northern part as well. So that's pretty sweet.
Hmm.
Yeah, lots of time. So with that kind of thing, are you guys like camping out for a couple days at these places, or like what's a typical, I guess, week for a surveyor look like?
Yeah, we've done day tripping from Saskatoon. We've done camping out, basically right on the lake. Um, a little bit of both. It kind of depends on the weather. Like Deef is big enough that, weather can screw up your plans pretty good
Yeah,
too, especially
time.
west wind, north wind too.
Yeah.
So you kind of just got to play it by ear.
Yeah, that's deep. That's deep in a nutshell. Like the wind and stuff can come up so quick there too.
Yeah.
Like with it being
Pretty
basically filled to the
dangerous.
top of the valley, there's no protection really from anything, right? So
Yep.
that lake's a beast that deserves to be respected, and unfortunately there is every couple of years it seems there is some people that lose their lives out there because that lake just turns so quick.
Yep.
And it's a popular place for people that really aren't water people or lake people as much, right? They go to the beach or something like that, and maybe they got a kayak or something, and then all of a sudden weather picks up, and and things can change there so quick. So yeah, that would be, I would say, would you say that's probably one of the hardest parts of this job is the weather with lots of these lakes?
It is. It is. It's hard to plan and just, sometimes you just have to be ready to go, like, especially late in the year when you're getting close to a lake being done and releasable, and you really want to get it done. And you're just kind of watching the weather for like one good day, before the ice starts to form, and you're out there, and it's cold, and you get, a nice calm day. But it's still cold late in the fall. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the challenge for sure. I honestly, like, we've finished up. I think I've mentioned this already, but we finished up the South Basin of Lake Winnipeg, or more or less. We're not really going to touch the far east side because nobody really goes there. Um, but that's been a 3-year project to
Oh,
sort of fill in the holes of the areas that we haven't already released. And it's
Okay.
just because the days are so few when you can get out there and actually be safe and collect good data.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's already frustrating enough when you're just trying to go out fishing, let alone you're just trying to go out and map, right? Like if you go out there and your day gets pull up to the water, like, man, this is way worse than I thought it was going to be. It's like, it's going to be a bumpy day, but to actually have to go out there and get information, like you can stick fish when the waves are up, obviously, but when you're trying to get good solid data, like you talk about, that'd be
It's
pretty,
impossible. You
yeah.
can't. You turn around and you go home and you lick your wounds and hope that tomorrow's better.
Yeah. No,
yeah.
that
No,
makes
that's
sense.
that's fair for sure. I guess for the folks listening at home, do you have any tips on how they can get the best accurate mapping on their units? Because obviously there's a lot of people that do have the time and put in the work to go map out on their own units and stuff. Like, is there any tips or tricks that you can give for people at home that want to go map out a little area on their own?
Well, the biggest thing is to get your transducer mounted properly, and we sort of
Okay.
talked about that. Um, like it's very rare, even for me who's mounted transducers on 30 or 40 boats over the course of my life. It's very rare that you get the placement right to begin with.
Yeah.
So first of all, make sure you put on a piece of transducer board, puck board, starboard, whatever material you want to put on your hull. But you don't want to be drilling lots of holes in your hull, obviously. And I think some people, you know, because of that, they just stick with the position that they, initially mount the transducer on their boat at the factory, or after they get it home and they buy a unit. And that's, you're just, it's hopeless, to be honest.
Hmm.
Some of the time, if you have it mounted too high or too low, or even rivets can throw off the turbulence and create bad signals, and then you're just fighting it the whole time. If you
Yeah.
can
Yeah.
get your transducer mounted properly, um, you just make your life so much easier from the context of user mapping.
Right.
Okay.
And so that would be, you're talking probably recording at like higher speeds
Yeah,
in that
definitely.
sense.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't, if you're just trolling and you're not even on plane ever, um, you know, you're okay pretty much however you have it mounted, as long as your angle is right. That's
Hmm.
another part of the equation, is you want the right angle. But the reality is when most people are fishing, and they're logging their data and auto charting or whatever, they're driving as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like as soon as you start driving over your fishing spot, you inject this bad data
1,000 foot
into,
hole.
yeah, and you gotta, exactly, it's confusing, and it's hard to recover from that. You got to go into your unit and manually delete data points, and
Yeah.
that's when it stops being fun. When
Yeah.
you're managing data, I think.
Hmm.
Okay.
Oh yeah. When you're having to deal with that all the time. And I guess you did say, obviously, as people can imagine, some of this is like some proprietary information, as we talked about before. But Would you have any insight into kind of? I've looked at some of the stuff, and it's crazy how many lakes are mapped in the states. Is this all being done similar to how you guys do it, or are people? Is there different ways that you can do this other than driving around with your boat? Like I've heard some people talk about satellite. Or like, is that actually a thing? Like, how do they have so many more lakes mapped than we do? Like official maps.
I think there's just a huge demand down
Okay.
there. The angling industry is orders of magnitude more valuable, if you will, than it is in Canada. There's just a greater population base, and I think in general people have come around to the value of maps sooner. It'll catch on, I think, more and more in Canada as well, now that people have kind of had a taste of good quality mapping.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we also have so much more water relative to the amount of people compared to the United States as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess the second part to that is how can some of these maps be off by so much? Like my one buddy, I think he was using Navionics at Last Mountain, and we went to drill a hole where it was 24 feet, and we drilled into mud. Like how have you seen that before with these? Like is that just kind of is there you got some points and it just assumes what the rest of it is between those points, or like how can that stuff happen? Do you have an idea on that?
I don't know exactly how other companies use the data or what data they have. I can infer a few things in Manitoba, at least based on what I see on the digital maps from other companies and what I see on like the old printed government maps. And I think, for a lot of lakes, they use the old government data, which
Okay.
was collected, a long time ago, pre-GPS days. People were probably, taking a sounding and then trying to triangulate manually shoreline features and whatnot. And honestly, I'm impressed that the maps are as good as they were,
Right.
given what those surveyors had at their disposal. But the reality is, it's just, it's not very good data to begin with. So there's a lot of potential for error when you're interpolating um, your data and
Yeah.
creating a map.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder as I've checked out some of those old maps that are like from 1960 whatever, and it is like you said, it is impressive how accurate some of them are in general terms, I guess, right? Not maybe the intricacies of a lake, but to have those general depths correct, it actually I found it quite impressive. And a lot of this stuff just fascinates me because it's so cool getting to basically peel away the water and see a full complete project basically. But I've always been interested in those, especially like I said, some of the lakes that I'm looking at. Talk to people. No, I've never been there. Never been there. There's nothing about it online except for some map from 1982, and it's like, oh, this is all
Yeah.
I got to go off of. So
Yeah, do you wanna come work for Angler's Edge Mapping? You sound like
maybe I fit that type.
yeah.
No, that makes sense. I guess did you have anything else, Brandon, or should we get into some of the questions from the listeners?
No, yeah, let's dive into those. I mean, there's obviously, we're in Saskatchewan, so there's a lot of Saskatchewan-based topics, and I guess, what is the horizon for Sask Lakes? Like, is Saskatchewan, going to be a high demand place in the coming years here for you guys? Are you guys just going to be kind of focusing on those two bigger lakes, that we talked about aside from Deef that you guys are already on? Are you guys wanting to dive into some more of those more remote lakes up north that people go to that maybe just aren't as well known? What's that look like?
Yeah, I always try to be a little bit careful with these sort of questions because we have plans, tentative plans. We have, people involved that have their own plans, but
Yeah.
we've got into the situation a few times where we thought something was getting done and we let people know, and then it didn't happen, or it didn't happen on the timeline that we
Yeah.
originally thought. So yeah, I always sort of temper the whole when is it going to get done, um, in terms of if it's going to get done. Yeah, we are really actually focused on Saskatchewan, and plan to do a lot
Okay.
in Saskatchewan over the next few years. We've got um, a good team established now, and we're making progress. Deef is a huge hurdle. Like we did almost 8,000 kilometers of survey on Deef, and if
Wow.
we did 8,000 kilometers of survey on Last Mountain and Tobin, they would be done,
Right.
right? So it's you know
Pick your
I
battles, basically.
we got to pick our
Yeah.
battles, but
Yeah.
it's not going to take us that long, and I think it'll be worth it.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess just so people have reference, before 2023, you guys had two Saskatchewan lakes on your list, with Lake of the Prairies, with a bordering lake, and then Mage Lake. And then since, or I guess new for 2023, it looks like you guys added six lakes. So Blackstrap, Crooked, I don't know how to pronounce this, Ispachow Lake, I think. Is that
Uh,
correct? Is that how you say it? Kind of.
I'm not going to correct you, put it that way.
Yeah, and then Kit Lake, Sealy Lake, and Shannon Lake. So Sealy and Shannon being one of the ones I was talking about at the top of the episode there, in the north there. And then obviously now we've talked about Diefenbaker. So I mean, you've already gone from 2 to now 8. So that's pretty big jump there in 2023 alone. And I mean, some of those being smaller, but also pretty cool lakes as well. Like I said, when you can get some information on some of those northern lakes, that's pretty neat to see. So I think that's pretty good. I mean, we did obviously, like Brandon said, had lots of questions about that. We actually had one for Buffalo Pound as well. Obviously, that's I don't know how interesting you'd find that. I kind of call it a mud bathtub. There's not there's not too much going on there. It's
Logan, you could do
there
that
would be a
one in
little
like
bit
an
maybe.
afternoon.
Yeah, I mean, with all the time I spend out there, I probably should I should map it a bit more. But it's like, oh, I found a drop. It goes from 8 feet to 11 feet. It's like there's not really much going on there. But I guess one thing you kind of hit on it a bit near the start of the interview. But we had a question here from Jesse, and he was kind of asking how much you notice things changing. Like, for example, he says he notices how much Fox's Point changes at Last Mountain throughout the years. So when you guys have done multi-year projects, is you kind of mentioned it, but do you see that happen quite often with changes, especially in river systems and stuff like that?
Yeah, so on the Shield, everything's very stable.
Right.
Um, Rivers change a lot. And while Angler's Edge Mapping hasn't mapped Tobin, I've actually spent a lot of time on Tobin. I'm a fisheries biologist by trade, so
Okay.
I did some work for Sask Power out on Tobin Lake in 2013, 2014, and 2015. And the transition zone from the river to Tobin, uh, it changes dramatically. Like we were there at a time when there was basically two major floods,
Okay.
and it we had a hydro acoustic receiver to track fish movements deployed right in the transition zone, and so basically you put an anchor down and then you float this receiver that detects the fish halfway up in the water column. So it's suspended, 10 feet off the bottom. And we deployed it like that in, I want to say, October. And then we came back in May to retrieve it. And the float that was 10 feet off the bottom was buried in sand. We could see it ever so
Wow.
slightly off the bottom. So, yeah, the scale of change, the magnitude of change on the Saskatchewan River, which has a massive amount of sediment load, is crazy, right? Like those transition zones are in constant flux, which
Right.
from a mapping standpoint is challenging for sure because you really want it to be accurate, super accurate. You're surveying it every year. for sure. So we kind of know what we're getting into with Tobin, because I've spent so much time out there, and we kind of have a plan to deal with that. And it's going to involve resurveying it continually, where there is change happening.
Right.
Not all of
Yeah.
the lake is going to change, but that transition zone is always going to change.
Right. So that's why you guys have probably a disclaimer. Maps are subject to change due to environmental conditions.
Yeah, like you can only do so much, but yeah, we're fortunate, I guess, in that most of our lakes don't really change that much. We kind of we wondered how much change Lake Winnipeg would experience when we started mapping it, because, well, first of all, it wasn't nobody really understood how much structure and intricacy there was out in the South Basin. I think we opened up a lot of eyes, but we also, started wondering, well, what are we getting ourselves into? Like, are we going to have to resurvey this thing every year? Like, people talk about the mud shifting in the sand and
Yeah.
all that. And what we've actually found is that the areas that we thought would be most prone to change, like the nearshore areas, they're not changing much. They're very stable. And where we have observed change is way out in the middle. And it's to do with these ice scours that I was mentioning before.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, so quite unexpected.
Right. Yeah. Well, I'm sure I could see it too. I don't know if it would have any reason to think this, but in some of those closer to shore areas, I'm sure those have been grinded upon year after year, and I could see them being quite solid probably at this point, right? Whereas if you get some anomaly out in the middle, that in places that aren't hit as much too, I could see that maybe creating more of a divot there, like just not as much resistance. Would that make sense too, kind of thing?
To a point, yeah, I think it would. Like, it's definitely mud out in the middle, and
Yeah.
where these sort of ice scours are happening, you can see the mud push up, you know, multiple feet, sometimes 8 feet high. Um, and yeah, the bottom type closer to shore is more sand, cobble,
Okay.
little bit harder material, so it would be less prone. But I'm still kind of surprised that it doesn't move as much as it isn't.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I got one last one that I had here for you. When you talked, like it even says on your website talking about propellers and lower units and stuff like that. How often are you changing out propellers and stuff like that? Pretty common.
Yeah, it's I don't have any hard numbers on me, but it's a lot. We we don't really want people using their own boats when they survey for us, because the the probability of damage, if you're putting in any length of time surveying, is so high. So, like, we almost insist that people use our Angler's Edge mapping equipment,
Oh,
so
okay.
that they're not risking damaging their own stuff.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I guess it also makes sense that those things happen because, as you can tell from the map behind you, you're not just mapping the fishing areas, right? Like you're doing the entire lake. And so you're going into some places that I'm sure lots of people don't typically go anyways, like in lots of those shallower areas, but you guys are mapping the whole thing. And so that's where you're going to find some oopsies and
Yeah,
stuff in there,
totally.
right?
It
Yeah.
sounds cliche, but we're going out hunting for rocks, essentially. Like,
Pretty
we're,
well, yeah.
we're
So
finding the
people don't
rocks so
have
that you
to.
don't have to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing God's work out there.
Okay, that's a little strong, but
Well, I mean, with the price of boats and stuff and the type
It's
of
nuts.
engines that guys are running out there, that's a big mistake. It's a lot different than when you'd hit that with your 30 horse or something like that, right? Like this is way different. So I could only imagine the sickening feeling that is. And like I've nicked rocks and stuff while guiding, but not going very fast, and even that's just a gross feeling. So I can only imagine when, especially with the equipment and stuff that you guys would be out there all the time with. It's like, oh, kind of. Does it get to the point like, oh, there's another one, or is it still kind of every time like,
oh,
oh man?
last year it was bad. Like, I don't know what it was. about last year, but we just the low we had I want to say we had three motors down with lower ends needing to be totally replaced, and we're struggling to get parts, and
Hmm.
yeah, it was not a good one.
Okay, so last one. How bad was Deef for that stuff? I know I've been ripping out there, and we've hit sandbars in the middle of the lake. Like, got lucky. It was just a sandbar, no rock really. But like, how much of that happened at Deef, if at all?
Just one catastrophic hit that took
Okay,
out a lower end.
okay,
I honestly don't think we lost any props on Deef, just lower end.
okay.
Hmm.
And it was something that I don't even think, if memory serves, uh, we weren't actually surveying at the time. We were just heading back to the launch, so we were going pretty good in an area that we hadn't surveyed yet.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, it was bad. And then the water level dropped like a week later, and we could see visually what it was. It was
What it
like,
was?
holy crap, that thing came like it was 60 feet deep, and it came up to 6 inches on that
Wow.
particular day. And then a week later, it was out of the water. You would have never hit it, but
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
That lake's a beast. It is different for sure. It's a nightmare for that stuff. Like I said, when we went through the sandbar that we hit, like I think we were going like 30 mile an hour, and it slowed us down. It stopped us. Didn't really do anything other than obviously like scrape some paint and stuff, but it was enough to stop us. And then we had to basically push the boat through the rest of the sandbar. But like you said,
right.
they come out of nowhere. Like we're a couple hundred yards offshore, and then boom, sandbar. There's nothing around that would show any of it. So I can definitely feel your pain there. But I guess we've kept you for an hour here. Um, I guess for yourself and Angler's Edge, where can everyone find you? Kind of plug away that stuff so people know where they can go find some prints. Obviously, you guys have apparel too, but where they can get the maps and stuff as well.
Sure. So we have a website, www.anglersedgemapping.com, and you can order pretty much everything that we've got from our website. We are on Facebook, and we're pretty active on it. We have an Instagram page, and I think that's it. We sort of
Yep.
did the YouTube thing for a little bit, but honestly, we haven't really been making many videos recently.
Oh, okay. Okay. No, that's fair. And they answer very quick on their Facebook, as I found out to set up to set up this interview too. So that's always nice to see from a company. But we appreciate you taking the time in your evening to come on here, and I think people are going to really enjoy this episode. I found it quite interesting and something a little different than just the fishing thing. So thanks for coming on.
No
Yeah, absolutely.
worries.
Thanks, Craig.
No, thank you guys. This was fun.